In the year 2175, Earth had grown accustomed to the hum of its space stations and the whisper of satellites drifting through the vastness of space. But one night, as the world slept, something unusual interrupted the constant flow of data. The signal came in like a soft ripple from a distant, unknown galaxy far beyond the Milky Way. Its source untraceable, at first a simple flicker of static, a pattern of numbers, then more patterns woven into something more intricate, something that felt intentional, as if it were waiting for humanity to notice. The world's leading observatories buzzed with activity. As the signal was analyzed, deep space sensors locked onto the mysterious transmission that had no clear origin yet bore a sense of purpose, not random interference, but a message. It was unmistakable, the pattern was deliberate, and the coding so precise it could only have come from a highly advanced civilization, the kind that humanity had yet to encounter. For days, scientists worked tirelessly trying to decipher the alien code. With each passing hour, excitement shifted to concern as the message revealed more and more complexity. It wasn't just a string of numbers or symbols. It was an evolving algorithm that seemed to reflect an intelligence beyond any earthly construct. No one knew what it meant, but the urgency was palpable. Something about this signal felt like a calling, and deep down, they knew they couldn't ignore it. The signal wasn't coming from just any distant star. It was emanating from a system located in the farthest reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy, nearly 2.5 million light-years away, a place no human had ever traveled, no probe had ever reached, no telescope had ever fully explored. And yet here was a signal beckoning humanity into the unknown with an enigmatic purpose that no one could yet understand. Within hours, a global council of experts was formed to decide how to respond. Debates were passionate. Some suggested ignoring it, fearing the dangers of provoking an unknown alien force. Others argued that humanity could not afford to miss the opportunity to learn from such an advanced civilization. The message itself could hold secrets to technological advancements that could leap humanity centuries ahead in mere decades. But time was ticking, and the decision was made. The transmission had been received, and humanity's first steps into the unknown had begun. An international task force of astronauts, engineers, and scientists was assembled, and within months they were aboard the first spacecraft to leave the solar system, designed to explore the source of the signal. It was to be a mission unlike any other, one that would take humanity to the edge of the galaxy, to unravel the mysteries of a long-forgotten world, and perhaps uncover the truth behind the strange transmission that had stirred them from their quiet existence. As the ship's engines powered up, and the crew watched Earth shrink away in the distance, the weight of what they were about to embark on began to settle, and no one knew what awaited them. No one could even predict what they might find at the edge of that distant galaxy. But one thing was certain: the world they were leaving behind would never be the same again, and neither would they. The journey into the unknown was long and full of uncertainty, but the crew of the Vanguard pressed on with unwavering determination. Each day was a test of their patience as the ship drifted farther from Earth, passing through the cold and empty stretches of space. The only contact they had with their home was the occasional communication from mission control back on Earth, where experts anxiously awaited every data transmission they sent. It took nearly 2 years to reach the coordinates of the signal, and as the Vanguard finally arrived in the alien system, the crew was met with an eerie silence. There were no bustling stars, no signs of life, no cosmic phenomena to speak of. Nothing seemed alive here, just a void stretching out into infinity in front of them, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy of their home system. The planet they were drawn to was a desolate one, a world that seemed to be little more than a shell of its former self, its surface cracked and scarred, as if some great catastrophe had struck it millennia ago. Where once there may have been sprawling cities and thriving ecosystems, there was only silence, the ruins of a forgotten civilization, stretched out as far as the eye could see, an expanse of broken stone and rusted metal, half buried beneath the harsh winds of this dead world. The crew descended through the atmosphere of the planet in their landing craft, and as they touched down on the surface, the sound of their engines was the only noise that broke the silence. The air was thin and dry, the ground beneath them cracked and desolate. There was no sign of any living creature, no plants, no animals, no movement at all. After securing the perimeter, they began to explore the alien ruins. Scattered across the landscape, strange structures loomed in the distance, towering relics that had once been majestic, but were now crumbling into dust. The crew marveled at the alien architecture, its sleek curves and angular lines. Unlike anything they had ever seen, it was clear the Sci-Fi had been a species of great intellect and innovation, but now their greatest achievements were little more than shadows of their former glory. They discovered vast underground complexes with walls lined with intricate machinery, but everything was lifeless, and still the once mighty systems that had powered their civilization seemed to be powered down and decaying with age. The crew found no records of the Sci-Fi people, no signs of their civilization's leaders, no statues or monuments to commemorate their achievements. Only the machines and the ruins remained. Among the wreckage of an enormous structure, they found a series of large cylindrical pods made of a material that seemed otherworldly. It was smooth and glowed faintly, as though some latent energy still lingered within them. The team carefully examined the pods, hoping to find clues to what had happened to the Sci-Fi, but they could not open them. They were sealed tight with an impenetrable barrier of metal. A sense of foreboding began to settle over the crew as they continued their investigation. It was clear that this once great civilization had been brought to ruin, but by what and why were they gone? The machines that remained seemed advanced beyond comprehension, but they were no longer functional, their creators lost to the ages. The crew had hoped to find answers to the mysterious signal, but instead they found only questions and the unsettling realization that this was no ordinary abandoned planet. Something had destroyed the Sci-Fi, something powerful enough to erase an entire civilization. And as the crew of the Vanguard stood amidst the silence, they couldn't help but wonder if they were now standing on the precipice of something far greater than they could ever have imagined, something that threatened not just the Sci-Fi, but perhaps all of galactic civilization itself. As days passed, the crew of the Vanguard grew increasingly uneasy. The planet's eerie silence seemed to grow louder with each passing hour. The desolate landscape offered little comfort, and every corner of the ruined city raised more questions than answers. The once majestic alien structures seemed to call up to them with their enigmatic presence, but nothing was clear. The deeper they explored, the more they felt they were intruding on a long-forgotten secret. It wasn't until the third week on the planet that they made their first breakthrough. Deep within the ruins, they discovered a massive underground chamber hidden beneath the collapsed city center. It was sealed off from the surface by an enormous metallic door, marked with strange symbols that none of the crew could understand. The door itself looked ancient but sturdy, and its mechanisms had clearly been untouched for eons. Despite its age, it hummed with faint energy, as though something deep inside the chamber was still alive. The team worked together to unlock the door using the alien technology they had already recovered from the surface. With each shift of gears and mechanical clicks, a growing sense of anticipation gripped the crew. After days of effort, the door finally groaned open, revealing the vast underground vault. The space inside was enormous, and its walls were lined with smooth metallic panels and crystalline screens flickering with life. It was in the heart of this hidden chamber that they found what they had been searching for. A massive holographic projection system built into the center of the room. As the crew powered up the system, the air in the chamber seemed to shimmer with energy, and then the projections began to form before their eyes. The holographic display revealed a vivid and haunting scene. The image showed an alien species in its prime, the Sci-Fi, a race of beings with sleek, elongated bodies and glowing eyes. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Their civilization was vast, their cities gleamed with light, their technology flourished, and yet the hologram told a story of their decline, a tale of an unstoppable cosmic force that tore through their galaxy, consuming everything in its path. The Sci-Fi had once been masters of the stars. Their technology was beyond human comprehension. Their ships were powered by energy sources that could warp the very fabric of space-time. But their greatest achievement would also become their downfall, an entity the Sci-Fi had referred to as the Eternal Storm, a cosmic anomaly that shifted unpredictably through space. Its energy was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The hologram flickered as it continued to show the Sci-Fi's final attempts to stop the storm. Their efforts were desperate and innovative. They attempted to harness the power of their own star systems, build shields that could withstand the storm's energy, and construct weapons that could strike at the heart of the anomaly. But each effort failed. Each new invention crumbled before the storm's onslaught, and with each failure, their once proud civilization weakened further. The Sci-Fi leaders had realized too late that their technology, while advanced, was no match for the sheer force of nature. The storm represented their world was dying, their ships were failing, their cities were collapsing, and with their resources stretched thin, they sent out a final message, a plea for help. They targeted it to any species that could hear it, a species that might possess something their own had lost the ability to adapt. They sought out humanity. The message was clear: their civilization was gone. The eternal storm was coming for everyone, and the Sci-Fi had one final hope: humanity's unparalleled engineering skill. The hologram flickered one last time before fading into silence. The room grew cold and still as the crew took in the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. They had found the truth: the Sci-Fi were gone, not because of their technology, but because they could not adapt fast enough to the cosmic anomaly they faced. But humanity might be different. They had the potential to do what the Sci-Fi could not, to find a way to survive and overcome the storm. The crew exchanged uneasy glances as the weight of the message settled on them. What had started as an exploration into the unknown had now become a desperate race against time to prevent the fate of the Sci-Fi from becoming their own. Back aboard the Vanguard, the crew gathered in the ship's command center, the weight of the Sci-Fi's message pressing down on them like a tangible force. The holographic projection had revealed the staggering truth. The Sci-Fi, with all their advanced technology, had failed to combat the eternal storm. The storm, an unpredictable and unstoppable cosmic anomaly, had obliterated everything in its path, leaving only ruin behind. And now, humanity was being called upon to do what the Sci-Fi could not. Captain Amelia Hayes stood before her crew, the room filled with a heavy silence. The holographic message had stirred a mix of emotions: fear, disbelief, and something else, something deeper. It was a challenge, a call to action. Humanity, with all its flaws and limitations, might be the only species capable of adapting in ways the Sci-Fi could not. But the question remained: could they succeed where the Sci-Fi had failed? "All right," Captain Hayes said, breaking the silence. "We have our mission. It's not just about exploration anymore. We have to find a way to survive this eternal storm before it reaches us. We're not just carrying the weight of Earth on our shoulders. We might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and total destruction." The crew nodded in agreement, their faces set with grim determination. They had seen the Sci-Fi's triumphs, but they had also seen their tragic end. Humanity would need something more than just technological advancement. They would need ingenuity, adaptability, and creativity that the Sci-Fi had lost in their attempts to fight the storm. That was their chance. Dr. Lucas Wren, the ship's lead scientist, was the first to speak. The Sci-Fi tried to build shields, weapons, and energy sources to counter the storm, but their methods were too rigid, too reliant on their old ways. "We need to think differently. We can't just rely on their technology. We need to adapt it, rework it, make it ours." The crew began brainstorming tirelessly, sifting through the remnants of the Sci-Fi's advanced technologies: weapon systems, power grids, propulsion engines, and attempting to integrate their findings with humanity's own creations. But it wasn't just a matter of replicating alien designs. It was about blending them with human innovation, finding solutions in places the Sci-Fi had never considered. Every failure brought them closer to the answer, forcing them to refine and rethink. Weeks passed, and the Vanguard became a workshop of discovery. Engineers worked around the clock to design new types of energy shields, more adaptive propulsion systems, and even ways to manipulate the storm's energy for their own benefit. Dr. Wren proposed a radical idea: a device that could tune into the storm's electromagnetic frequencies and allow them to ride its waves instead of trying to resist it. But the clock was ticking. The storm, according to the Sci-Fi's records, had already begun to make its way across the galaxy, slowly but inexorably. Their calculations showed that within a year, it would reach the borders of the solar system. Despite the weight of the situation, there was a sense of optimism among the crew. They were no longer just the observers, the explorers. They had become the innovators, the creators. The synergy between human engineering and sci-fi technology was beginning to yield results, each breakthrough propelling them closer to a solution. And with each success, the crew realized that they were writing a new chapter in galactic history, a chapter where humanity wasn't just a bystander, but the key to survival. Captain Hayes paced the command center as the first prototype of their hybrid technology powered up. "We're ready," she said, the words filled with resolve. "We've built something that can adapt to the storm, something that can survive it." She turned to face the crew, her voice steady but filled with quiet urgency. "Now, we test it." The test would take them into the heart of the eternal storm, where the Sci-Fi had once failed. The crew knew this would be their greatest challenge yet, but as the ship's engines roared to life, there was no turning back. Humanity was ready to face the storm. And this time, they weren't going to just survive. They were going to change the rules. The test was set. The prototype, a vessel like no other, had been designed to combine the best elements of human ingenuity and sci-fi technology. It wasn't just a ship, it was humanity's answer to the storm that had wiped out an entire civilization. Every engineer, every scientist aboard the Vanguard had poured their knowledge, their energy, and their hopes into this mission. It was their time to prove that humanity could adapt, overcome, and outthink the impossible. Captain Amelia Hayes stood in the command center, her gaze fixed on the swirling vortex of the eternal storm just beyond the ship's viewport. The storm itself was a cosmic anomaly of unimaginable power, an energy field that bent and tore at the fabric of space, consuming everything in its path. The Sci-Fi had fought it with all their might, but they had not been able to outlast it. Now, humanity would face it head-on, but with an entirely new approach. Approaching the storm's outer edge, Lieutenant Sarah Maxton's voice crackled over the comms, her hand steady on the controls. She had been with the mission since its inception, and now she was at the helm, piloting the Vanguard directly into the heart of the anomaly. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, but it held firm, a testament to the fusion of Sci-Fi and human technology that powered it. "Remember," Captain Hayes said, her voice calm but filled with the weight of what was at stake, "we're not just fighting the storm. We're studying it. This ship, these systems, they are designed to adapt. If we survive, we learn. If we don't, we make sure no one else makes the same mistake." With a soft hum, the ship's hybrid shields powered up, glowing faintly in the dim light of the command center. The energy shield was the product of weeks of tireless work, an innovation that could adjust its frequency to match the electromagnetic fluctuations of the storm. It was their best chance, but no one knew for sure if it would work. The first wave of the storm hit with surprising force. The ship shuddered violently as the storm's chaotic energy whipped against the hull. Outside, the blackness of space became a swirling maelstrom of light and energy, bright bolts of electromagnetic radiation flashing in every direction. The ship's sensors flared, scrambling to keep up with the rapidly shifting conditions. "Shields holding at 92%, Lieutenant Maxton reported, her voice tight with focus. "Energy surges coming in fast. We need to adjust. Now." Captain Hayes nodded, her eyes scanning the data streams on the display in front of her. The Sci-Fi had built their shields to block out the storm's energy, but they had never anticipated the way the storm's power could shift so unpredictably. The human-designed adjustments, focusing on adaptability, were the key. The ship's systems began to hum as the shield frequency adjusted again, shifting in real time to match the storm's violent fluctuations. "Shields at 96%, Maxton said, the relief in her voice palpable. The ship had withstood the initial blast, but the storm was far from defeated. It was only just beginning. "We're going deeper." Hayes gave a sharp nod. the grip on her chair tightening. "Push forward. Keep monitoring those energy fluctuations. I want to know if we start to see any patterns." The ship's engines hummed as the Vanguard pushed further into the storm. The crew's hands were a blur as they worked together, adjusting parameters, recalibrating systems, and monitoring the storm's unpredictable shifts. For every surge of energy that hit, they adapted, recalibrating the shields, fine-tuning propulsion systems to avoid being overwhelmed. But then, something unexpected happened. As they moved deeper into the storm, they began to notice a subtle pattern emerging. The energy surges were not entirely random. There was a rhythm, an ebb and flow that the ship's systems could track. It was as if the storm, while powerful and chaotic, had an underlying order, something that could be understood and perhaps even predicted. "Captain," Dr. Lucas Wren's voice echoed from the back of the room. "I think we've got it. The storm has a pattern, an energy signature that fluctuates at regular intervals. If we can align the ship's systems with that pattern, we might be able to ride the storm instead of fighting it. Can we adapt the systems fast enough?" Captain Hayes asked, her voice steady, but with a glimmer of hope. Wren was already at his console, his fingers flying over the interface. "I believe so. We just need to fine-tune the ship's propulsion systems to sync with the storm's rhythm. It's not about resisting it. It's about moving with it." Captain Hayes took a deep breath, feeling a flicker of optimism. If they could adjust their systems to match the storm's energy signature, they might just have a fighting chance. Test was working. The ship was holding together, and for the first time since they had entered the storm, they had a sense of control. "All right," she said, "let's do it. Let's ride this storm." And with that, they pushed forward into the heart of the eternal storm, not as mere survivors, but as innovators, testing the limits of human ingenuity. As the Vanguard plunged deeper into the heart of the eternal storm, the crew's nerves were taut, their senses heightened to every flicker of energy, every change in the ship's systems. The storm was not like anything they had ever encountered. It was a living, breathing force of nature, a cosmic tidal wave of energy, its patterns complex, shifting with the unpredictability of a wild storm. And yet, against all odds, the ship was holding steady. The newly adapted systems, designed to sync with the storm's rhythm, hummed with life. The propulsion engines, now calibrated to match the storm's energy pulses, powered the ship forward, allowing it to glide through the fluctuating currents of electromagnetic radiation. Each surge was met with calculated precision. Each wave of energy was harnessed rather than resisted. It was working, against all expectations. It was working. "Shields at 98%. Lieutenant Maxton called out from the helm, her voice tight with focus. "We're holding steady. The systems are adapting faster than expected." "Good," Captain Hayes said, her eyes fixed on the screens in front of her. "Keep the ship aligned with the energy pulses. We don't want to get thrown off course." The crew worked together seamlessly, their hands moving quickly to adjust controls, monitor data, and analyze the storm's shifting energy patterns. Dr. Lucas Wren, who had been at the forefront of the ship's design, was the first to speak. "This is incredible," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "The ship isn't just withstanding the storm, it's actually learning from it. The more we move through it, the better the systems adapt. It's like we're sensing with the storm itself, becoming part of it." Captain Hayes nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "We still don't know how long we can keep this up. The storm's full force is still ahead of us. Let's keep our focus." But as the Vanguard pushed onward, the crew began to notice something unexpected. The storm, which had once seemed like an unstoppable force of nature, was now behaving differently. The energy surges, once chaotic and random, were becoming more predictable. The ship's systems, enhanced by human ingenuity, had done the unthinkable. They had found a way to anticipate the storm's movements, to ride its waves instead of resisting them. "This is unreal," Lieutenant Maxton said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We're not just surviving. We're thriving. We're moving faster through the storm than I ever thought possible." Dr. Wren's face lit up with excitement as the data streams displayed an anomaly, something unprecedented. "We're actually using the storm's energy to accelerate. The ship's power reserves are holding steady, and we're moving at a faster rate than predicted. This could get us to the storm's core before we run out of energy." Captain Hayes' heart raced as she watched the readings. They were doing more than surviving. They were using the storm's power to propel themselves forward. They were becoming one with it. "Keep monitoring the systems," she said, her voice steady, but filled with a surge of hope. "We need to be ready for anything. If we hit any resistance, I want to be able to adjust instantly." As the Vanguard barreled deeper into the storm, the crew noticed an odd sensation, a subtle vibration that resonated through the ship's hull. It was a low hum, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a pulse, sensing with the storm's energy. Then the storm shifted. The ship's sensors went haywire. The steady energy pulses suddenly became erratic, faster, more intense. The shields fluctuated wildly, and for a brief moment, the Vanguard lurched, its systems struggling to keep up with the rapidly changing energy signatures. "Captain," Maxton shouted, "the storm's rhythm has changed. It's accelerating." Captain Hayes' heart skipped a beat. This was the moment they had feared. The storm was unpredictable, and they had never fully understood its power. They had adapted to it, yes, but now it was fighting back, faster than they could anticipate. "Hold on," Hayes barked. "Boost the shielding, reroute all power to the stabilizers. We need to stay in sync with it." The crew worked with frantic urgency, every second feeling like a lifetime as they scrambled to adjust the ship's systems. The storm was moving faster, its pulses surging with terrifying force. The Vanguard trembled violently as the energy hit it, pushing the limits of its adaptive technology. Outside the viewport, the storm raged in a frenzy of light and darkness. The Vanguard was caught in the heart of the storm's fury, the energy flashing and pulsing around them like an endless cosmic whirlpool. "Shields at 65%, Lieutenant Maxton reported, her voice strained. "We're taking too much damage. We can't keep up." "Don't stop," Captain Hayes shouted, her eyes never leaving the display. "We can still do this. We've adapted, and we're not giving up now." The Vanguard strained against the storm's might, its systems teetering on the edge of collapse. The crew was holding their breath, their eyes locked on the readings, hoping that the ship's ability to adapt would be enough to survive the storm's final test. And then, as if responding to their persistence, the storm began to slow. The erratic pulses settled into a rhythm once more, albeit at a higher intensity. The ship, battered but still intact, continued its journey forward. "We made it," Dr. Wren whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "We actually made it." But Captain Hayes wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. They had faced the storm's fury, but the true test had only just begun. The Vanguard hung in the eye of the storm, its systems straining against the overwhelming forces outside. The storm's fury had lessened, but the crew knew this was only a temporary respite. They had adapted, they had survived, but there was still one question hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. Would it be enough to carry them through the final leg of their journey? Captain Hayes paced back and forth in the command center, her mind racing through every scenario. The data had suggested that the storm's heart, its core, was a place of unimaginable power, a place where the energy was concentrated in a way that no species had ever fully understood. They had adapted to the outer layers, but what lay at the center? "Captain," Lieutenant Maxton's voice cut through her thoughts. "We've made it to the storm's core. Sensors are showing an energy buildup unlike anything we've encountered so far. The pulses are intensifying again, and the ship's shields are holding, but just barely." Hayes didn't need to look at the readings to know the stakes. The storm was a living thing, its energy alive, shifting, pulsing like a heartbeat, and they were about to reach its very core. "Is it consistent?" Hayes asked, trying to sound calm. "Yes," Maxton replied, her voice tense. "The storm's energy patterns have stabilized, but it's fluctuating between extremes. We're moving at a rapid pace through the core. But at this rate, we could either find a way to harness its power, or we could be torn apart." "We can't risk being torn apart," Dr. Wren interjected. "If we push any harder, we could overload the ship's systems. We need to take it slow. Let the ship's adaptive systems sync with the core's energy without pushing too far too fast." Captain Hayes nodded. Dr. Wren was right. They had come this far because they had been able to read the storm, to adapt their technology to its rhythms. But this was a new level of unpredictability. No one could know what would happen next. "We'll proceed with caution," she ordered. "Maxton, keep the ship aligned with the storm's pulses. Let's adjust our trajectory to keep the ship shields in sync with the fluctuating energy." "Aye, Captain," Maxton replied, her hand steady on the controls. As she adjusted the ship's course, the crew could feel the hum of the engines as they glided deeper into the core. It was as though the storm itself was pulling them forward, guiding them through the chaos with an eerie calm. For hours, they continued their descent into the heart of the storm. The ship was holding together, its adaptive systems keeping them one step ahead of the increasingly intense energy surges. The crew worked in synchrony, monitoring every fluctuation, making adjustments on the fly. The feeling of tension was palpable. Each crew member knew they were on the verge of something monumental, but none of them dared to speak the words aloud. And then, without warning, the storm shifted again. The pulses surged to an unimaginable intensity, the ship's shields flickering in response. The core of the storm was unlike anything they had anticipated. It was not just an energy field. It was a living, pulsating entity, an ever-changing force that seemed to shift in rhythm with the ship itself. The Vanguard lurched forward, thrown off course by the storm's violent twist. The shields dipped below critical levels, and the ship's hull groaned under the pressure. The crew's alarms blared, a cacophony of warning signals that echoed through the command center. "Shields are failing," Maxton shouted. "We can't hold this much longer." "Hold steady," Captain Hayes barked. "Dr. Wren, can we adapt the systems to this sudden change?" Wren's fingers flew across the console. "I'm rerouting power to the shields. If we can just sync up with this new rhythm." Another pulse of energy slammed into the ship, and the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the room. The ship trembled violently as the storm seemed to recognize the Vanguard's presence, pushing back against their intrusion. "Captain," Dr. Wren yelled, his voice strained. "The storm, it's trying to reject us. It's adapting to us just like we adapted to it. We need to shift our systems in real time, or we won't survive." For a moment, Captain Hayes felt the crushing weight of the situation. The storm was no longer a cosmic anomaly to be studied. It was an adversary, an entity actively trying to destroy them. But they weren't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything they had sacrificed to get this far. "We're not giving up," she shouted. "Maxton, I want maximum power to the shields, every last ounce. Dr. Wren, reroute everything you can to the propulsion system. We're going to outpace it." The crew's hands flew across their stations, operating with precision and urgency. The Vanguard had become more than just a ship. It had become an extension of their will, their last hope. The storm may have shifted, but so had they. For a split second, the ship's systems seemed to buckle under the intensity of the storm's energy, but then the feedback loop clicked into place. The ship's propulsion systems began to hum louder, more in sync with the storm's rhythm. The shields stabilized, holding firm against the cosmic pressure. "We're back in sync," Dr. Wren said, his voice filled with relief. "We've adapted to the storm's core energy. We're not just surviving anymore. We're thriving in it." Hayes let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. They had done it. They had turned the tide. But the heart of the storm was still ahead, and they knew they weren't out of danger yet. The real test was about to begin. The Vanguard drifted deeper into the storm's heart, its systems now fully synchronized with the unpredictable pulse of the energy field. Outside the ship, the storm had become a swirling maelstrom of light and darkness, every second flashing with cosmic brilliance. The crew had passed the point of no return, each member aware that they were entering uncharted territory, where survival and failure hung by a razor-thin thread. Captain Hayes stood at the center of the command room, her eyes fixed on the readings, her mind focused on the task ahead. The Vanguard had adapted, more than anyone could have anticipated. But now, they were about to face the storm's final test. The energy fluctuations in the core were intensifying again, more chaotic than anything they had encountered so far. Shields holding at 92%, Lieutenant Maxton reported, her voice steady despite the tension. Energy surges are reaching critical levels. We're going to need to make a final adjustment to maintain our course. Captain Hayes nodded, her gaze never leaving the view ahead. Prepare for the final phase. We need to keep the ship aligned with the storm's fluctuations. If we lose sync now, we're finished. Behind her, Dr. Wren was working furiously at his station, rerouting power and making calculations at breakneck speed. I think we've reached the peak of its power, he said, his voice tight. The storm's core is pushing out energy at a rate we haven't seen before. The ship's shields won't last much longer if we don't find a way to stabilize it. Hayes turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. Then we find a way. We've come this far. We can't fail now. The ship lurched as another massive pulse of energy slammed into them, the ship's shields flickering dangerously. The Vanguard trembled under the pressure, but the crew held their ground. Every one of them focused on keeping the ship together, keeping the systems in sync with the storm. Shields are down to 55%, Maxton reported. We're losing power. Dr. Wren was working faster now, his fingers flying over the console as he tried to stabilize the ship's systems. I think I can modify the energy routing to channel some of the storm's power directly into the propulsion system. If we can just tap into its core energy. Before he could finish, the entire ship shuddered violently as another surge of energy tore through the hull. Sparks flew from the consoles, and the lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The storm was becoming too powerful, and the Vanguard was being pushed to its limits. Come on, Captain Hayes muttered to herself, gripping the edge of the console. We can do this. It was now or never. Maxton, adjust the trajectory. Hayes shouted. Align with the next surge. We can't wait for it to stabilize. We have to move with it. The lieutenant's hands moved with lightning speed, manipulating the controls as the ship veered toward the next pulse of energy. The ship groaned under the strain, but its adaptive systems held steady. We're aligning, Maxton called out. Shields at 40%. Wait. It's working. The storm seemed to respond, its fluctuations syncing with the ship's movement. The Vanguard began to glide more smoothly, the ship's propulsion system humming with newfound power as they rode the storm's energy rather than resisting it. It was as if the storm was guiding them now, not as an enemy, but as a force of nature that had finally accepted their presence. The crew watched in awe as the core of the storm began to unfold before them, its energy now harnessed and channeled through the Vanguard like a cosmic river. The ship surged forward, the once chaotic maelstrom now flowing in harmony with their movement. We've made it, Dr. Wren whispered, his voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. We've actually done it. We're inside it. We're surviving the heart of the storm. Hayes didn't allow herself to relax. Not yet. The storm had been unpredictable from the start, and she knew better than anyone that they could still lose it all in an instant. But as the Vanguard moved deeper into the storm's core, a strange calm settled over her. The storm, for all its power and chaos, had been something that could be understood, something that could be worked with. They hadn't just survived the storm, they had learned to coexist with it, adapt to it, and harness it. For the first time, the crew felt a glimmer of hope. Not only had they faced the unimaginable, they had conquered it in a way no one had believed possible. Humanity's resilience, creativity, and ability to adapt had done what the Sci-Fi, with all their advanced technology, could not. "Steady," Hayes said quietly. "We've reached the core. Now, let's get back. Let's make sure the rest of the galaxy knows we found the way to survive." With a final surge of power, the Vanguard raced through the heart of the storm, now fully in control of its energy, its systems functioning with perfect synchronization. The storm had been defeated, not by force, but by the ingenuity of a species determined to survive. Humanity had passed the ultimate trial. And as they made their way back toward the edges of the storm, Captain Hayes allowed herself a rare smile. The universe had just learned that humanity was not to be underestimated.